Alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salam ala Rasulullah. The question is asking about the Nifas and the beginning time and the ending time for the Nifas. Now, the Nifas is the postnatal bleeding that the woman experiences post-delivery. So once she's had her child, she will bleed. That is known as the Nifas. Salama radiallahu anha, this is in Abu Dawood and made Sahih by many of the ulama, including Albani, who made it Hassan, but many of the ulama made it Sahih. That she said that كانت امرأة من نساء النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم, women of the Messenger of Allah صلى الله عليه وسلم, meaning at the time of the Messenger of Allah صلى الله عليه وسلم, تقعد في النفاس 40 ليلة. They used to wait in that postnatal bleeding period of a maximum of 40 days. Now, with the majority of the ulama, they have said 40 days is the absolute maximum. So if she has bled for 40 days, even if the bleeding continues, that cut-off period is 40 days. Some of the Shafi'iyya and the Malikiyya have said it can go up to 60 days because of other reports that have been narrated from others from the time of the Salaf. And Ibn Taymiyyah is of the view that it's connected to the blood. So that could even be 100 days. As long as she sees the postnatal bleeding, coming out of her, then it's connected to the blood. And this is because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, يَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنِ الْمَحِيضِ قُلْ هُوَ أَذًى. They ask you about the menses, so say it is something which is impure. So what Ibn Taymiyyah is saying from this ayah that we learn is that as long as you got the bleeding, the impurity is there. Now, just as a side note before we continue, the majority of the ulama as well have said that all of the ahkam pertaining to al-hayd applies to nifas. So she shouldn't pray, she shouldn't fast, relations not allowed to enter into the masjid, etc. But the question is actually asking about the beginning of the nifas. When does it actually begin? Now, some of the ulama have said linguistically that the nifas is connected to the nafs. Nifas, nafs. Therefore, they have said that the nifas is whenever the bleeding, starts, whenever the womb starts to bleed postnatal, meaning it has to be after the delivery. And this is the view of the majority of the ulama. Some of the Hanabila, they have said, if she begins to bleed, even if she hasn't delivered yet, if it is connected to the contractions which would then eventually lead to the delivery, then that is part of the nifas. So now, when a woman is about to deliver, she will break her water, the mucus plug will come out, and she might then start bleeding. The Hanabila have said, if this is now the beginning of the contractions and the delivery, some of the Hanabila, they have said, this is now the beginning of the nifas. Whereas the majority of the ulama said, no, once the child has been delivered. So now we know the beginning and now we know the end. Why is it important for us to know? Well, the end, we kind of discussed it when it comes to salah and all these other practical actions that she needs to, include in her daily life. But what about the beginning period? Now, if we take the view that the nifas starts when the contractions begin and then the bleeding can be seen, then the Hanabila, like I've said, some of the Hanabila have said that that's the beginning of the nifas, therefore she doesn't need to pray, she doesn't need to fast. Whereas the majority of the ulama have said, no, she still needs to pray. So she could be in labor, she could be, having the contractions, and it's Dhuhr time, and it's Asr time, and it's Maghrib time, and it could be quite lengthy, she still needs to pray. And this seems to be the more correct view, and this is the view of the majority. A person might then say, okay, well, it's difficult, she's obviously experiencing a lot of pain, biological differences, making wudu might be an issue as well. What we will say is you should get someone to try and help you. If you can't, perform the wudu, then, tayammum could be possibly an option for her. And she's allowed to combine. And she's not able to stand, she can sit and pray. But what we are saying here is that the salah still is an obligation upon her. Once she has delivered, that's when the nifas begins. And for that period, she doesn't need to pray or fast until the maximum of 40 days. Or whatever comes before that, which is the 40-day period, or she dries up. Just like menses, like we've said before, all the rulings of menses apply to hayd as well. So hopefully this answers the question for the person that's asking this question. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He gives us the best of understanding of the religion and the best of practice. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He makes it easy for our mothers and our sisters and our daughters. And likewise we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He makes the next generation of Islam a generation of Iman and Taqwa. هذا والله أعلم وصلى الله على محمد.